In this video lesson, we'll have a look at the concept of drainage density as well as the factors that influence surface runoff and infiltration. When it rains, apart from interception of the rain by plants, the water is either going to remain on the surface of the earth and flow over the earth's surface as surface runoff, or the water is going to infiltrate and soak into the ground. The factors that have an influence on whether the water is going to stay as surface runoff or infiltrate are as follows. The rainfall, specifically the amount and the intensity of the rainfall, the gradient or the slope on which the water falls, the vegetation, especially in terms of the ground cover, the soil moisture, in other words, is the soil already filled with water or is it dry, and the permeability of the rock. In other words, these factors will determine whether we have surface runoff or infiltration. Rainfall, gradient or slope, vegetation cover, soil moisture, and rock permeability. The diagram shows a river with a high drainage density, and that simply means that there are many streams visible on the Earth's surface. Why is it that many streams are visible at the Earth's surface? This is the result of more surface runoff and less infiltration. In other words, we see this many streams at the Earth's surface because most of the water has remained on the Earth's surface as surface runoff, and very little of the water has actually infiltrated. What is important to remember is why this water has in actual fact stayed on the Earth's surface as surface runoff. And here are the factors. We'll have more surface runoff on a steep slope or gradient. That is because gravity is going to pull the water downslope and it will have very little time to soak into the ground. When you have less vegetation or ground cover, in other words, when the vegetation has been removed, we also have more surface runoff. When the rock is impermeable and it is difficult for water to pass through the rock, the water will stay on the Earth's surface as runoff. When the soil is already saturated and filled with water, it's going to be difficult for additional water to soak into the earth, and heavy rainfall does not allow for water to soak in because the water builds up very quickly and it remains at the Earth's surface. So high drainage density simply means that there are many streams visible on the Earth's surface as a result of the fact that there's been very little infiltration and more of the water has remained on the Earth's surface because of a steep gradient or slope, because of reduced or less vegetation cover, impermeable rock, saturated soil, and heavy rainfall. Rivers with a high drainage density often has a higher stream order, and just for interest's sake, rivers with a high drainage density are also said to have a fine texture. A low drainage density implies that there are very few streams visible on the Earth's surface. Why is this the case? Because the majority of the water has actually infiltrated and soaked into the earth, and very little of that water has remained on the Earth's surface as runoff. Therefore, there are very few streams that we can see on the Earth's surface. Those factors that have an influence on low drainage density, in other words, those factors that encourage infiltration, would be a gentle slope or gradient, because this allows for the water to gather on the ground and gives it enough time to soak in. More vegetation or ground cover, this traps the water and keeps it there long enough in order for the water to infiltrate the earth. Permeable rock, which will allow for water to penetrate and pass through the rock. A fairly dry or unsaturated soil with a low soil moisture content will allow for more infiltration and light rainfall allows for more infiltration. So you're going to have a low drainage density, meaning that there are few streams at the Earth's surface as a result of more infiltration. This infiltration is caused by a gentle slope, more vegetation or ground cover, permeable rock, low soil moisture content, and light rainfall. Rivers with a low drainage density have a lower stream order, and in this case, a river with a low drainage density is said to have a coarse texture. In closing, just two ways in which the term drainage density can be defined. It can be defined in terms of the number of streams in a drainage basin or the frequency of streams in a drainage basin, but it can also be defined as the total length of all the streams divided by the area of the drainage basin. And this is often measured in terms of kilometers per square kilometer.